Hey YouTube, Amanda here on behalf of Core TCG, and with Abyss Rising only 1 month away from release, I thought it would be very appropriate to cover Spellbooks, which is probably the deck I'm actually going to be running. I really like how it runs, and it's been testing really consistently against windups and other decks that are really big right now. I of course have to see how they're going to fare against all the other support for other decks that are going to be also released in Abyss Rising, but as of now it looks like a very promising deck. And we're going to go over the deck list that I have currently built, that I've been testing with, and I'm also going to go into the pros and cons of the deck, and of course potential sides in case you're worried about the matchup but not building the deck or playing it specifically. So let's begin. So first up we have 3 Spellbook Magician of Prophecies. You're already familiar with this. This came out in Return of the Duelist. This is your searcher. It's like your Earth agent basically. It searches out any of your spellbooks, so it gets that field engraved setup that I'm going to explain in a moment when I show you the cards it goes into. 3 breakers. It's not excessive, it's actually an amazing card. It clears back rows, and then you can use Spellbook of Power on it to boost it and then get that guaranteed search off with 2600 beater. It's a dark, so it's a target for Chaos Sorcerer, and it's just all around a really good card. So that's breaker. Triple High Priestess, the star of the deck. This is like your Master Hyperion, but she has 2500 attack, but has so many toolboxing options that we're about to get into. Justice of Prophecy. These are proxied out. Don't freak out. These are not official Abyss Rising cards. And if you don't know what it does, I'll read it to you. During the end phase of your turn, if you activated a Spellbook spell card this turn, you can banish this face-up card and add 1 level 5 or higher lighter dark spellcaster type monster and 1 Spellbook spell card from your deck to your hand, and the effect can only be used once per turn. So this can have potential abuse with Tour Guide into Levier plays. You can recycle this. It's also obviously toolboxes into Priestess and toolboxes into cards like Chaos Sorcerer, which is really, really good. The potential con to this though is obviously you are going to have an open field when you activate this effect. It can also get Bottomless, and because it gets Bottomless, of course, that means it has more than 1500 attack, which means you can't search it out with cards like Saying Again. But it's still obviously a really good card, and it kind of compensates for the fact that cards like Temperance can be a little inconsistent, because this gives you the setup you need for hand plays with Priestess. And the thing about Temperance is, if you draw into that, in current Prophecy builds, one of the shortcomings is it's a potentially dead card if you open up with your Priestesses in those random hands that you do get them. So Justice gives that extra balance, and then it has that extra target, which is Chaos Sorcerer. So it's really good. Double Veiler, it has super synergy with this deck. It's a spellcaster, it's a light, it's a 1-star, so you can make Priestess plays where you summon her, pop, and then go into a Stardust or Scrap Dragon. You can also summon it with a Chaos Sorcerer and go into Arcanite for more popping. So it's just a really good effect, and has all-around amazing stats for this deck. 1 Temperance, 1 is all you need. You have all sorts of other ways of getting your Priestess out, which is like Justices. You don't want that extra dead draw if you run more than that. I think in this build, double Justice, 1 Temperance is a really good ratio to have. 1 Chaos Sorcerer, of course. 1 Hangman of Prophecy. This is another Abyss Rising card. Its effect, it's a 1-star spellcaster. When this card is sent to the graveyard, add 1 level 3 Prophecy monster from your deck to your hand. This means that this can be milled and it gets its effect. It can be foolished and it gets its effect. It's a 1-star, so when your field spell goes to grave, which I'll get into in a moment if you don't know what it does, this is your 1-star target. You can search from deck. You don't have to be forced to special summon an effect failure from your deck, and it's a mandatory effect. So this obviously gets out your Temperances and gets out your Justices for all of the setup you need. 3 Spellbook of Secrets. As we know here, this is the card that searches along with your Spellbook Magicians and just builds up your grave presence and also gets all the cards you need to your hand. 3 Spellbook Tower of Prophecies. Now this is going to give the deck the push it really needs. If you don't know what it does, it's essentially Gates from the Dark World, but without having to have a hand cost, and it has an extra added Destruction Gear Town style effect. So I'm going to read this to you. Once per turn, during your standby phase, if you have 1 or more spellcaster monsters in your graveyard or on your side of the field, you can return 1 Spellbook spell card from your graveyard to the bottom of your deck, except the Spellbook Institute, and draw 1 card. When this card is destroyed by your opponent's card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one spellcaster type monster from your hand or deck whose level is less than or equal to the number of spellbook spell cards in your graveyard. It's resilient, it's hard to get off the field. You can play this and set a card and not have to worry about Storm, because it will always be a 1-for-1. 2 Spellbook of Powers. Like I said, play this with your breakers and it just gets you that setup you want. Plus 1,000 attack, helps you run cards over, helps you even OTK. Spellbook of Power is a pretty good card. Double Spellbook of Wisdom. Spellbook of Wisdom, I can't stress enough why this is so amazing. And this is also why I'm not running MSTs in this deck, because you have triple Breaker and triple Priestess. It's going to pop through everything, and if your opponent does have something like a skill drain, you can toolbox this to your hand in so many ways, especially with your Spellbook of Secrets. So if you want to get around a card like Skill Drain, this is the easiest way to do it. 1, Spellbook of Life. I was running set 2. I just found it to be a lot better at 1. It's that one card, because you have to have that reveal cost for it, can be dead sometimes. Sometimes you want to set your spellbooks, like Wisdom, and then you end up with a weird hand if you top deck into this or something. Also, this is a post-setup card, which means you need to have something like a Priestess already engraved to get this effect for it to be anything worthwhile. So if you're opening with a weird hand like a lot of Priestesses, this is just not something that helps. And you can recycle it with Spellbook Tower, so there's really no need to play more than one, because if you need it, you can put it back into your deck, or you can simply search it with a Secrets. It can also be one of the best cards, but it's such a 50-50 coin toss with this card. It's best played at 1 in my opinion. Double Duality. Now, as I go through the cards, you'll realize this is a 42 card deck, and why it's a 42 card deck is because 42, I feel like that's the sweet spot for this, because it has so much toolboxing, it doesn't matter, and 42 helps offset the fact that you run triple Priestess. It decreases the odds of opening with a card like this. So Duality is in here not for thinning, but for giving you the option of the 3 cards it obviously lets you look into. Pot of Duality is probably one of the best cards you can have in your hand with this deck, because when you play it, you reveal your 3, and you're either going to need a 3rd spellbook for a Priestess you might have in hand, or you might want to set up with a Justice or a Spellbook Magician, because there's so much setup in this deck, and it doesn't hinder you because you will always have some sort of setup play that doesn't require special summoning. So Pot of Duality is the card for that, and it's just really, really good. Then you have your standard Dark Hole Monster Reborn book, and book is nice with Spellbook Magician, because you can reuse his effect since he gets it on flip as well. 1 Magical Dimension. I freaking love this card. This card is really great. If you don't know what it does, it's pretty old. If you control a face-up spellcaster type monster, target 1 monster you control, tribute that target, then special summon 1 spellcaster type monster from your hand, and you can destroy 1 monster on the field. If you choose to use its destruction effect, your opponent cannot activate Torrential Tribute or Bottomless Trap Hole on the monster's summon, because it's not the last thing to happen in the game state anymore. It also bypasses card effects like Stardust Dragon and My Body as a Shield. So Magical Dimension just gets around a lot of stuff. It helps you get dead Priestesses out of hand if you're in that random situation. I feel like it's a really good card at 1. It can get cloggy at 2, but it gives you extra plays, and it gives you extra plays also without having to minus, because you have these used floaters on the field, like Spellbook, Magician of Prophecy, or a used Breaker even, and you can just Magical Dimension into it into further Priestess plays. So I really like this card, and I think it's good. Double Compulsory. Compulsory is a really flexible card. Double Torrential. Double Bottomless. Double Deprison. And 1 Judgment. If you can see here, I don't run Warning. I've been testing the deck with Warning and with, you know, a few less of these traps instead, and replacing it, and I just found that the 2,000 cost is a huge shortcoming for this deck, because you often make plays that leave you a little bit exposed when you don't have a Priestess on field, and it can just be a dead card. I am obviously going to further test with this, but thus far, this is the most consistent that I've had it at. It easily, completely steamrolls windups like 2-0 without effort. The most it has a hard time against are matchups that it breaks even against, and if you're a good player at piloting this, you can easily win in those matchups and you can outplay your opponent. This is not a one-trick pony deck. This deck has plenty of options. A few of the weaknesses that I can see thus far is just opening up strange hands, which almost all decks can do that, like opening up too many Priestesses. Another weakness, obviously side deck. If this becomes something big after Abyss Rising, which I can see it doing so, I think it's a really good deck, and it deserves attention. It's going to see a lot of side deck hate. Side deck hate like Closed Forest. That's going to hurt. Thunder King is a hurtful card too, but this deck has its answers to it. It runs the back rows, it runs power, it has plenty of ways of getting around Thunder King, but Thunder King can be an issue. If a deck is able to consistently remove your Spellbook Tower off the field, that also is poses an issue. But one thing about this deck versus a lot of decks that have field spells that centralize around it, like Dark Worlds and like Dragoonides, this deck does not nearly rely on the field spell as much. So that's one really good aspect of it. This deck can make really game-changing plays and significant plays without this card, but this is the mid to late game momentum that you need to win. Like, it's what gives you that extra plus and that extra advantage over your opponent. So that's basically the main deck so far. Obviously, I haven't built a side yet because this is going to be Abyss Rising support. That's going to make this build. And of course, with that Abyss Rising support, there's going to be other decks around, so we're not sure what exactly is going to be relevant for the side deck specifically yet. And of course, the extra deck is pretty self-explanatory. You can even overlay 2 High Priestesses to go into Big Eye, which is a surprisingly common play. You also have Arcanite Magician. Though I have to say, one of the major cons to this deck isn't the deck itself in play, but the fact that so many of these cards are foiled out. So if this does become big, it gets a lot of attention, it tops. You're going to see an increase in price of these ultimate rare Spellbook Magicians. The High Priestesses are going to be really expensive. The Spellbook of Secrets are going to go up. Who knows what rarity Spellbook Tower is going to be. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being a secret rare. And we also don't know what rarities Hanged Man and, of course, Justice is going to be. So this is going to definitely be a more expensive deck versus a lot of decks that have been presented to us in structure form, like Dark Worlds. So that is one major con to this deck, because it does need an extra deck, a side deck, and the main deck has a lot of expensive cards in it. So that's my analysis thus far on the deck. I really like it. I'm definitely going to be playing it, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope this gave you some insight into what you might potentially see in this matchup and the deck once Abyss Rising comes out, or at least have some build ideas. Of course, there's plenty of cards that you can play in this. You're not restricted to just a build like this. I like Kaiku a lot. I couldn't make space for him, but I think he's going to be a really relevant card. I think at least one in the main deck is healthy, but I haven't made space in this one yet. If you guys want a 10% discount on all core TCG singles, which actually is pretty cool because you can, if you're interested in getting spellbooks while they're low, because they're probably as low as they're going to get right now. Once Abyss Rising comes out, they're going to go back up in price. They're going to be harder to find. You can enter in DDG Magician, and that's going to give you a 10% discount off of all core TCG singles. So you can even get your spellbooks off of there, because you'll get it for a pretty good price. I hope you enjoyed this video. Take care.